I'm in the middle of a modern, bustling city, but behind me, there's a building that has stayed constant for centuries.
For nearly 1,000 years, Exeter Cathedral has stood proud on the skyline of this city. A place of faith, of worship, a place of history and heritage, of rich beauty and extraordinary imagination.
Welcome to Exeter Cathedral. You step into the nave, and it's awe-inspiring. Beautiful columns rising up, spreading out. It's like a forest of stone. It's the longest continuous medieval vaulted stone roof ever built. Amazing.
Beauty, richness, ornament everywhere, and all to glorify God. That's what cathedrals were for. Medieval Christians sought to celebrate God's majesty. But also, they feared his judgment.
And so here in the choir, the very heart of the cathedral, the priests would say prayers for the people of Exeter.
What would it take to build a place like this? How much would it cost?
And who had that kind of money? Well, here's a clue. 60 feet tall, it's a masterpiece of English oak. Made entirely without nails, every piece fitted together with wooden dowels. Any ideas? It's a throne, a bishop's throne, to be precise.
Medieval bishops were more than just priests. They were politicians. They held the rank of baron. They were major landholders, men of substance and wealth.
One bishop, above all, was responsible for the creation of this extraordinary building. His name was Walter Bronescombe.
He was enthroned Bishop of Exeter in early medieval times. But the cathedral back then was very different. It was dark, it was gloomy. All that's left of that original Norman cathedral are the north and south towers.
And you see how rugged the walls are, with almost no window. It's more castle than cathedral.
The challenge always in building a cathedral was how to support the weight of that colossal roof. For the Normans, that meant thick walls.
But in time, new solutions emerged. Buttresses, columns, arches. Less wall meant more window. More window meant more light.
So Bronescombe decided to rebuild the old Norman cathedral in the new style, with as much window as possible.
And here, in the Lady Chapel, you can see the fruit of his vision, this amazing light-filled space.
It's called the English decorated style of architecture, and it's beautiful. Full of geometric patterns, molded stonework playing with layers of light, color on the floor and the walls. For 80 years, an army of architects, stonemasons, laborers, craftsmen and women worked without cranes, without power tools. Every stone hoisted, every column carved and polished by hand.
And look close at the detail of their medieval world. Do you see the musical instruments played by those angels?
Fiddles, harp, bagpipes.
And next to that crucifixion scene, do you see the mermaid? And there, is a man with leaves growing out of his face. He's a green man, a symbol of rebirth rooted in old folk traditions. The medieval mind was full of such wild imaginings.
These were people who'd barely explored beyond the confines of Europe. On the margins of maps, they wrote, "Here be dragons." They imagined fantastical creatures. Monks compiled bestiaries of these strange beings, which the stonemasons used as inspiration.
And here in the choir, you remember how I said the priests would pray for the people of Exeter? Well, the services were held standing up, and they could take up to 6 hours a day. And so, on the underside of the seats, they had these ledges for the weary priests to lean back on. They were called misericords, or mercy seats. And under the ledges, look, amazing things. Sirens, centaurs, dragons. And here, carved at least a decade before the first elephant was brought to England as a gift from the King of France. Whoever carved this had never seen one in the flesh, hence the legs, which seem more like the legs of a horse. But how magical this beast must have seemed in those distant days.
In the century after Bronescombe's death, working from east to west, the building was completed. Outside, one final flourish.
This is the west screen, the first thing you see as you approach the cathedral.
It's the work of a master mason called William Joy, and it is truly joyful. A riot of angels and knights and kings and apostles, bursting with movement, almost alive in conversation. It's meant as a vision of heaven.
And when they were restoring it recently, they found on the underside of the figures flecks of medieval paint, blues and greens and golds all set on a rich red, which means that once all these vibrant, energetic characters were alive with color.
It's truly a gem, this place, a national treasure. But one dark night in 1942, that made this place a target. It was during the Second World War. British planes had bombed the German medieval city of Lübeck. And in revenge, the Germans targeted the finest English cathedrals. Exeter made the list.
There were volunteers up on the roofs, spotting for enemy planes ready to put out fires. As the air raid began, they were in the safety of the towers as a 500-pound bomb smashed into the cathedral below, the chapel of St. James destroyed.
When King George VI came later to see the restoration work, he called it the greatest jigsaw puzzle in the world. Knowing how close we came to losing this all makes a visit here all the more special. This treasure trove of history, this place of living faith.
Almighty God, you have made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless till they find their rest.
We've only just scraped the surface. There's so much more to discover.
An astronomical clock, a porcupine, a woman with 2 left feet, scenes of torture, a murder, a rotting corpse.
It's all here. But now it's up to you to make your own journey of discovery, to become part of the story of Exeter Cathedral.